The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
So, I've been doing this video series for almost a year now, with 20 videos covering nearly 40 games in total. And this is the most intimidating script I've had to write so far. Super Metroid is, in my opinion, as close to a perfect video game as one can get. If I were the type to tack arbitrary scores onto my reviews, this game would be a 10 out of 10. It is one of the most masterfully crafted games of its franchise, of its genre, of its generation, and of all time. Nothing I write on a page, nothing I say into a microphone, could ever properly convey how absolutely phenomenal Super Metroid is. This could end up being the best review I've ever written, who knows? And I still wouldn't be able to do this game its proper justice. The level of thought, care, and artistry that went into every last aspect of this game is astonishing, and the game wastes absolutely no time in demonstrating this from the second it loads up the title screen. Okay, I know Nintendo prides themselves on maintaining a very sanitized, family-friendly image, and at risk of being met with that SpongeBob roller coaster meme, I think the Metroid series is the closest first-party Nintendo has ever come to just making actual horror games. A dark, cold laboratory, the last living Metroid, the same one Samus spared at the end of the previous game, being kept in confinement, surrounded only by dead scientists and a chilling music score. Upon starting a new game, you're greeted with voice acting, for one line, but that's still an impressive feat for the Super NES. That single line probably took up like a third of the cartridge. Super Metroid occurs directly after the events of Metroid 2, with Samus delivering the Metroid hatchling to the Ceres space station for the purpose of scientific research, in the hopes that studies of the unique properties of Metroid biology will be used to the benefit of the galaxy. But no sooner has Samus left the station that she receives a distress signal. The space pirates were tracking Samus, and attacked Ceres Station as soon as she left to steal the baby Metroid. Samus confronts Ridley to stop them, but their battle is cut short when the station's emergency self-destruct is triggered, forcing a retreat. Samus pursues the fleeing space pirates to planet Zebes, and the opening moments of Samus's return to the planet that started it all is where the atmosphere of the game really starts to set in. Samus soon finds herself in the remains of the destroyed Mother Brain facility, and as she descends further into Zebes, she's accompanied only by silence and the gaze of security cameras, eerily following her every move. The opening moments of Super Metroid are somehow compelling and gripping, yet completely isolating, all at the same time, and it's a feeling that persists in varying degrees through the entirety of the game. Outside of its opening text crawl and its short prologue level, Super Metroid doesn't use cutscenes to tell its story. Every piece of information is conveyed entirely through environmental cues and intuitive world design, and Super Metroid is one of the masters of this show-don't-tell style of game design. In my upcoming Sonic & Knuckles review, available early on my Patreon for members of the $5 tier or above, wink wink nudge nudge, I talk about how Sky Sanctuary Zone is like one giant playable cutscene in the sense that it conveys all the relevant and important story details purely through the gameplay itself. And Super Metroid is that same sort of thing, stretched out for an entire game. Outside of brief written instructions upon acquiring each new power-up, the game never feels the need to blatantly tell you how to play or what to do. It doesn't talk down to the player. Instead, it uses environmental cues and nonverbal storytelling to subtly guide them to where they should go, giving them all the tools they need and just trusts them to figure things out from there. For instance, if you didn't realize there was a run button before, this collapsing bridge in Brinstar will definitely make sure you learn about it. And if pure level design isn't enough to clue you in on things, the game does have a few more clever and unobtrusive methods of conveying information to the player. Most blatant is that there is now an in-game map, which can be accessed in full by locating each area's associated map station. These maps not only color code visited and unvisited rooms, but will also mark which ones contain equipment and upgrades with a simple dot. Not enough to completely spell things out to the player, but just enough to keep them informed. In a few instances, some of the friendly fauna of Planet Zebes will demonstrate some of the game's less obvious movement methods, such as the new wall jump. And the game's Attract mode also shows a few of the more obscure options at Samus's disposal, such as the Shine Spark and Crystal Flash, the latter of which can recover Samus's health in desperate situations. And Samus's moveset has been greatly expanded, as well as basic functions like a run button and diagonal aiming, all with a completely customizable control scheme I might add. There are easily double the amount of available upgrades this time. The Spider Ball from Metroid 2 is missing, but every other upgrade from the last two games is accounted for and then some. There's the expected Morph Ball, high jump boots, various suit, etc., but new this time are things like the Speed Booster, which allows Samus to build up incredible speed to become an indestructible force, and grants her access to the advanced Shine Spark technique, which allows her to defy gravity and zip through the sky at the cost of some of her energy. The new X-ray scope is a game changer, allowing Samus to examine her environment for hidden passages or indicators of how to move forward. No longer is the player expected to just take wild guesses, bombing and shooting at random tiles in the hopes of stumbling upon the next hidden room. The X-ray scope lays any interactable walls or floors bare for the player to see, ensuring that you never stay lost for too long. There's the expected features that return from Metroid 2, namely save points and energy and missile recharge stations. And we also see Samus's starship playing a role as well, being an all-in-one rest stop that refills all of Samus's resources and allows you to save. Also, apparently taking a page from Mega Man's book, we see new reserve tanks that can store excess health recoveries for emergency use. Several established pieces of equipment receive more powerful versions too. Super missiles and power bombs increase the explosive yield of missiles and bombs respectively, and the gravity suit completely protects Samus from lava damage and keeps her immune to water resistance that would otherwise hinder her running and jumping. The 4 beam types from Metroid 2 all return as well: Ice, Wave, Spazer, and Plasma. And not only do their effects all stack this time, except for Spazer and Plasma, you only get one or the other, the new Charge Beam upgrade allows Samus to charge her arm cannon for a more powerful shot. And just as an added bonus, you can even enable or disable any of your required power-ups as you desire via the pause menu. Whenever I replay this game, I'm always impressed at the lengths the game designers went to teach the player as they go, in a way that seems completely natural and intuitive. For example, immediately after getting the super missiles, you reach your first green door, which can only be opened by said missiles. And upon doing so, the impact tremor from the missile knocks down a few hidden enemies from the walls and ceiling, teaching you through simple and clear demonstration that the super missiles have this secondary effect as a utility as well as a weapon. This is something Metroid games have been doing since day one. Every one of Samus's available weapons has multiple uses, and that's still true here. The grapple beam doubles as both a method of traversal and a weapon of its own, and keeping the charge beam powered up will cause Samus's jumps to act as a sort of makeshift screw attack, protecting her from minor damage and damaging weaker enemies on contact. Some of the best moments in Super Metroid are when you use your tools in clever ways to access the next area you need to go to. This giant glass tube is a great example. It's such a distinct visual, completely unlike any other room in the game, so the first time you pass through it, it sticks out in our minds. You just know there's something important about it. And lo and behold, once you have power bombs, laying one inside the tube causes it to shatter, opening the way to an entirely new, massive area of the map. There's also the way using skilled wall jumps or bomb chains can allow you to access new areas or power-ups early. Just like the first two games, this one offers multiple endings depending on the player's time. Combined with those numerous opportunities for sequence breaking, it's no wonder why Super Metroid has one of the largest and most active speedrunning communities to this day. Adding to the game's intricate level design and incredible atmosphere is an absolutely stellar soundtrack by one Kenji Yamamoto. Not to be confused with the other Kenji Yamamoto, who composed music for various Dragon Ball video games and plagiarized music for Dragon Ball Kai. This is a completely different Kenji Yamamoto, who just so happens to also be a music composer. I know, the world's funny like that sometimes. Good job, Kenji, too. You weren't satisfied just copying other people's music, you also copied someone else's name and career. Yamamoto's score for Super Metroid is easily in my top 3 video game soundtracks of all time, with moody and ambient tracks that perfectly convey the proper feel and atmosphere of their respective areas, while simultaneously remaining very rich melodically. There aren't many music composers in the video game industry who can stack up against Nobuo Uematsu in my eyes. But with just one game, Kenji Yamamoto plants himself firmly in a very close second place. I could keep gushing like an idiot over the soundtrack for this game, but instead I'll just play a few seconds from a few different tracks and let it all speak for itself. Combat and enemy interaction in Metroid has never felt smoother than it does here. The simple addition of diagonal aiming really improves things, as does a toggleable option that allows Samus to moonwalk, their words not mine, while she's charging her weapon. Bosses especially act as a showcase of the improvements Super Metroid made to both combat and overall game design, as well as being their own cinematic story events in their own right. Ridley and Kraid have returned from the first game. Ridley's fight hasn't changed much aside from him being bigger and more mobile, but that's made up for by the fact that it's the most difficult of the game's battles. Kraid, though, has been promoted from a slow, dumb, projectile-spamming damage sponge into a massive monster that requires precise aiming, timing, and skilled platforming to defeat. But all the new bosses arguably steal the show from the two returning classics. The ghostly Phantoon haunts the wrecked ship, and Samus has to defeat it in order to restore electricity that will allow her to pass through its halls. The fight with Dragon allows the player to use their wits to win in one attack at the cost of some HP, attaching the grapple beam to exposed wiring while in the beast's grasp to electrocute it. Perhaps the standout is Crocomire, whose fight ends in a gruesome death and a surprise counterattack. Even outside of big set-piece boss battles, though, enemy encounters in Super Metroid can still contribute to the game's style of non-verbal, gameplay-driven storytelling. As you explore previously unseen areas of Planet Zebes, such as the aquatic region Meridia, you begin encountering Mocktroids, artificial versions of Metroids, and it only makes sense that these are the result of space pirate experiments. While still nothing to be taken lightly, these fakes are not nearly as dangerous nor durable as the real thing, showing that the pirates still have a lot of work to figure out, explaining why they were so aggressive in abducting the Metroid hatchling. Space pirates trying to weaponize Metroids was established all the way back in the first game, and now we see them making even more headway in that regard. All that information is conveyed not through cutscenes or dialogue, but natural, organic gameplay. The game's final act through a rebuilt version of Turian is also unforgettable. Metroids abound here just like the first game, but this has much worse implications this time around, as Samus had already successfully eliminated the Metroid species in the last game, meaning the space pirates have already managed to create more by using beta radiation on the stolen hatchling. Eventually, she reaches a large room full of nothing but putrefied Zebesian creatures, drained of all life and disintegrating when touched. One creature is still living, though, and as it approaches, Samus prepares to fend it off. Until the Super Metroid devours it. Yeah, the title of the game isn't just denoting that this is a Metroid game on Super Nintendo. The Super Metroid is a thing that actually exists in the game's story. And once it's fed on its latest prey, it makes for Samus next. It latches onto her, rapidly draining her energy, the bounty hunter helpless to fight back, but at the last second, the Metroid stops. It lets out a saddened cry and leaves Samus be. The Super Metroid is the very same hatchling Samus spared at the end of Metroid 2, and that act of mercy ultimately resulted in the Metroid sparing her life in return. The space pirate experiments may have mutated the hatchling to a massive, terrifying size, but it still recognized Samus as its mother. This all follows with a rematch against the Mother Brain, which at first plays out as a simple repeat of the final boss from the first game, but it soon takes on a new form, and despite Samus's best efforts, she would eventually become too weakened to fight back. Mother Brain prepares one final attack. And then... The finale of Super Metroid is a cathartic payoff to everything the previous two games had set up. Planet Zebes, the Space Pirates, the Queen Metroid, and the Metroid Hatchling, it was all leading up to this moment. It caps off this trilogy of Metroid games in a way that almost feels like a series finale. And for a while, that's what we assumed Super Metroid was. There wouldn't be another Metroid game released for 8 years, completely skipping the next console generation. For many fans, disappointing as it may have seemed, it did make sense that the franchise may have just ended after this. After all, where could the series even go from here narratively, with the franchise's very namesake now being canonically extinct? Thankfully, Metroid would eventually return with some absolutely stellar titles, but in all honesty, if this had been the end of Metroid in totality, I don't think that would have been that bad, because what a fucking high note to go out on. Super Metroid is a brisk but substantial 8 to 12 hour action-adventure game that is meticulously paced at every turn. Every area, every screen of this game feels purposeful. Nothing feels pointless or unnecessary. Everything the player does and every discovery they make has a lasting effect on the rest of their adventure, oftentimes opening the way to new objectives or bosses in a completely different area. It subtly signposts the player in the right direction from objective to objective without holding their hand or insulting their intelligence. It tells a story that isn't intrusive and almost never takes full control out of the player's hands. Rarely have I seen a video game so perfectly and so elegantly encapsulate the core philosophy of its gameplay like Super Metroid does. It's this game in particular that helped to establish the Metroidvania genre, to which countless indie titles owe their very existence. It builds on the basic mechanics and world design of its first two games in all of the best possible ways, with gameplay so smooth and precise it took years for other 2D action games to control and feel as good as this one. Metroid 1 and 2 may have laid the groundwork, but Super Metroid was what truly showcased the underlying appeal of the genre the series pioneered. In much the same way Mega Man X built and improved on the core mechanics of its series, Super Metroid demonstrated the full potential of the first two games in one massively impressive package. Super Metroid, to this day, stands as the gold standard for exploration-based 2D action games. It is the quintessential game of its series, the quintessential game of its genre, and, in my eyes, the greatest video game ever made.